Thank you very much, Victoria, for that great presentation. So we actually have 24 minutes left, or
Oh, we
23.
do? Great.
Yeah, yeah. So with that, we'll begin our Q&A session. And thank you for sharing all that information. Obviously all the whole presentation, but all the information about how people can get in contact with you. So that's very helpful. And your books are available through our bookstore, therealtruthabout.health.com, as well
Yay.
as other platforms. So there they are, if anyone's interested in getting Victoria's books. And now we'll begin the Q&A part of the presentation. And I just want to let the audience know that if they would like to ask a question, they can raise their hand in Zoom. We don't take questions from the chat. John has put the details of how to raise your hand in Zoom into the chat, so you can review that if you have a question for Victoria. And so one of the things that I think people struggle with as they're beginning is really just how to get started, right? So, and I know that it can be very overwhelming. You gave a tremendous amount of information right now. What are the few things, like the simple things, to ease someone into this lifestyle?
You start with something. What are you willing to do today? And what is exciting to you? So for me, the idea of beautiful food is really helpful. I was having a very stressful time many years ago. I was already plant-based, and I decided to move to the country and realized I had no skills for living in the country. But the first time I went to the supermarket and I put all my wonderful plant-based foods in the basket, and the woman just stopped the conveyor belt, and she looked at me and she said, "I've had this job for 15 years, but I have never seen such pretty groceries." And I thought, what an interesting phrase. Pretty groceries makes pretty people, healthy people, people who live well. So I think that's a great place to start. Now, maybe you just want to colorify your diet. So just think about adding more greens and berries. Try some kind of new pretty food. And then when you're thinking about the other side of the thing, because what makes this whole food plant-based diet so powerful and what makes it work is two things. On the one hand, we've got the pretty groceries. We've got the fruits, the vegetables, and the kind of back. I think the fruits and vegetables are like the all-stars. It's sort of like, imagine a big gala musical, and you got your leads out in front, maybe your romantic leads singing to each other. And then you've got all the dancing boys and dancing girls. So that's going to be the grains and the legumes. Very important. I know Dr. Greger is talking in his latest book about that eating more beans is one of the best things that Americans could do. There was another big study that said eating more fruit is what we need to do. So we need more plants. Those are the healers. But the other thing that's going on is we're not having the animal foods and the processed foods. And that's where you're going to get more arguments from people out in the world who see things differently. And they're going to tell you, you need the egg white omelet, you need the salmon, whatever. This world is very big and very complex, and people look at it from different points of view. But the bulk of the solid science that is not coming from commercial interests is that plants are where it's at, and you need to push out the other stuff. So when you get rid of the animal foods, you're getting rid of all cholesterol, almost all saturated fat, which is found in large quantities only in animal foods and tropical oils, the coconut oil we talked about, palm oil, all that stuff you want out. And it's devoid of fiber and full of hormones and all kinds of things that are given to the animals. And I personally believe that the fear chemicals that go into those animals at the time of slaughter. I spent a day in a slaughterhouse. You don't want to do that. A horrible experience, and yet I'm so glad I did it, because now I know firsthand what goes on there. And those chemicals, all that adrenaline that goes into that animal at the time of death. You don't want that. And as far as I'm concerned, I don't want the karma of that. And it's so interesting. Sometimes when you're around a lot of older vegans, and it's not 100% across the board. This is not a panacea. This is not a way for it to have eternal life. But generally speaking, older vegans do really well. We tend to look pretty good. And it's this thing of you're kind of looking around this group and it's like, wait a minute, what are we doing? And we're doing all this good, healthy stuff, of course. And I happen to believe we're getting a sort of little cosmic help because we're not leading to the destruction and the suffering of these animals.
So yeah, so someone like Betty White, people like who you watch are the vegans, and then they're wildly healthy, live to a really ripe age.
Yes.
Is something that is inspiring for sure. So you mentioned finding, like you mentioned studies, specifically non-commercially funded studies. Are there any specific studies that have helped you come to the conclusions that you have in your books? And what are those studies?
I'm not a scientist, so I get my studies largely secondhand from people like Dr. Greger.
Hmm.
I am someone who lives life to the fullest. I've always been fascinated by nutrition. As I said, my dad was a doctor and I kept trying to cure myself as a kid. So the one study that I talked about with meditation, that's probably my favorite because that is 12 years of youthfulness for sitting quietly twice a day. So I think your more scientific presenters will be able to cite studies better than me. For me, it's more experience. It's that I was really sick when I was 20, and now I'm 74 and I'm really well, and I don't take any medication, and I don't have the diagnoses that people in my family had years before this. And again, with a caveat, that doesn't mean that at some point I won't. It's age happens to people. And at a certain point, you come to see, okay, I've been here a lot longer than I'm going to be here. So if I speak for you next year and I happen to need a medication at that time, I'm not going to be ashamed of it. But I do think it's pretty cool that with this lifestyle and this diet, there aren't a lot of people at 74 who are not on a single prescription drug. And I'm pretty proud of that.
No, that's great. So you talked about sunscreen, and there's, especially in this community, there's a lot of, I guess, controversy over sunscreen. And you
Yeah.
also mentioned, use the analogy of putting things on your skin getting absorbed into your body. Use the
Mm-hmm.
analogy of the nicotine patch.
Mm-hmm.
What sunscreens do you recommend that
Yeah.
aren't toxic, right?
Right.
Because it is going to go into your body.
Mm-hmm.
And how does, then we have the whole vitamin D thing. And if you're blocking the sun from getting in, into your body,
Mm-hmm.
you're gonna have lower vitamin D production. So if you can hit
Right.
those points.
Yes. And I think, again, it depends on your priorities. I mean, obviously, we need vitamin D and we need to get it somewhere. But it seems that for many people, it's really hard to get from the sun. Even if you live north of Atlanta, if you go out and run and get sun and then you shower immediately, that's going to cost you some sunblock, being dark skinned, all these things are going to impede the vitamin D. So I find it easier for me to just supplement. And there are some people that I know who have been around this movement for many, many years. And again, in the old days of natural hygiene, they were big on sunlight. And sunlight is important. It's important for your mood. It's important for everything. But whether you want to expose your skin to it, I think is a personal choice. I'm a little bit vain. And as an ethical vegan, I want people to want to do what I do. And having skin that doesn't have wrinkles and spots and things that are the after effects of a lot of sun exposure, I think makes me a better advocate for what I want to do than if I was somebody who had lain on the beach for the past 60 years. So I'd use always non-toxic sunscreen, non-toxic everything. And so in the case of sunscreen, that means a barrier method, like a zinc oxide. So it more sits on top of your skin to keep the rays from getting in. Some of the chemical kinds, actually act from within. So you don't want that. So I only get the things that environmental working groups approve of, sold in the health food stores, works for me. But if you love being out in the sun and you don't do it to excess, you don't burn, you see a dermatologist, you get yourself checked and make sure any little marks aren't going to turn into something awful, then by all means, follow your own heart and your own good sense. Because there are some things I'll fight for. I'll fight for veganism because that is worth fighting for. But if I want to use sunscreen and you don't, I'm not going to fight for that, because you have as much right to choose what you don't do as I do to choose what I do. And hopefully we can all be together in this, respect one another, and learn from one another, because sometimes we change. We'll do something for a while and then we'll say, oh, you know what? I think it's going to work better that way. So we do the other thing.
So in one of your books, you touched upon the connection between veganism and mental health. Can you expand on that relationship?
Yeah, I believe that when you're putting good out into the world, it makes you feel better about yourself. And it's so hard to feel like you're really doing a lot of good in the world because life is so busy. I mean, just getting to the email and the Facebook messages, it's like another part-time job for a lot of people. And so all the things that we might want to do in terms of volunteering, we look at people who have been blessed with great wealth and they can do all sorts of amazing philanthropic things. And it's like, oh, I wish I could do that. But you know what we can do is we can be vegan. And when you do that, so much of a ripple effect happens. It's absolutely spectacular. You are saving the lives of actual animals every single day and every single year. You are freeing up foodstuffs to feed people in impoverished parts of the world. You are stemming climate change. We know that if all transportation, all carbon, usage of fossil fuels ceased, which of course is not going to do, but hypothetically, it would take 100 years for those greenhouse gases to leave the atmosphere. If we got rid of animal agriculture, which is probably not going to happen overnight either, but probably more likely than getting rid of all fossil fuels, 10 years. And we might actually have 10 years. We don't have 100. So simply eating 3 meals a day, which you're doing anyway, can do so much good, not only for yourself, but also for others, that it's just going to make you feel better about who you are. And when you feel better about who you are, you're going to take better care of yourself and everything is going to elevate. Not to say that there isn't a time to see a therapist, to work with what's going on internally. But for most people who just kind of get the blues, this is a wonderful way to live.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to turn over to our audience to ask a few questions. So we have Cheryl Littleton. Please state where you're from and ask your question.
Yeah, hi. I've enjoyed this so much. Thank you. I am in Olney, Maryland, and I didn't catch quick enough the yoga breathing that you referred to, the site.
Yes,
And I tried to look it up and I couldn't find it.
Okay, I put it in the chat. Can you see the chat, Cheryl?
Sorry, I didn't go back there.
That's okay.
Okay, I'm back there now.
Yeah. So, and I'll just talk about it while you're looking. It's Shivananda, which sounds like it has an H in it, but it doesn't. It's Sivananda, yoga, pranayama, that means breathing exercises, and it's from Guragan, India, Guragon. And just putting all those search words into YouTube will do it for you. If you can't find it, just email me, victoria@victoriamoran.com, and I'll give you the exact link. I do this series about once a month. It's really wonderful.
Oh, perfect. All right. Thank you. Yeah, I think I've got it, but thank you
Okay,
so much. Appreciate that.
wonderful. Thanks for being here.
Mhm.
Right, perfect. So thank you for that question, Cheryl. And our next question is going to be from DA. Oops, hold on. I think I unmuted the wrong person. Give me 1 second here. And DA, go ahead and ask your question and state where you're from.
Thank you so much. I'm also from Maryland, and my question is, can you suggest a vegetable broth recipe? I was told by someone I know who knows Ayurvedic medicine that if you have problems digesting food, another option would be to do a vegetable broth, and that would be like 4 or 5 hours of cooking, and then you would actually consume the broth. So I
Right.
was wondering if you had any suggestions on what vegetables would be good. And then secondly, you mentioned vitamin D and K2. There's a controversy whether you should combine K2 with vitamin D. And then finally, I was told black pepper with turmeric helps absorb it. So those are my thoughts.
Cool. Okay. I'm totally with you on the black pepper with the turmeric. I'm not good at remembering numbers, but the percentage by which the black pepper increases the antioxidant absorption in the body is really big. And to also have the turmeric with a food with some fat in it, like some avocado or some nuts, is another way for the turmeric to be even more beneficial. And then you were asking about K2 and vitamin D. Excuse me, there's always going to be controversy, especially when we get into supplements, less controversy on the food, maybe. So I take it together. I take the K2 and the vitamin D. I have not experienced or been told by any of my practitioners that I shouldn't do that. And so, it's kind of the Wild West when it comes to supplements. You just have to read and consult people that you trust and come to your own decision. And the great thing about supplements and food is it's not like drugs. It's not like something that's going to be really dangerous. There might be a more effective and a less effective way to do something, but the fact that I take vitamin D and K2 and maybe you don't, it doesn't mean that either one of us is going to run into some horrible problem because of that. So I think we really need to kind of let things level out and kind of not sweat the small stuff and just do what makes the most sense to us until something else makes the most sense. And also, if you have somebody in your life that you really trust, I'm really lucky because I've been in this movement for a very long time. And so all these great plant-based doctors, I can just call them up, and I understand that is a privilege that most people don't have. But there are a lot of great ways to get this work. I mean, if you can't call up Dr. Greger, you can read How Not to Die, and it's almost as good. So good luck with what you figure out on that. And if you learn something fascinating, please let me know, because I would like to know it too. And now you ask your number one question. I forgot what it is.
All right, let me unmute him again here. Give me
Okay.
1 second here. And okay, DA, oops.
Yes.
Go
Yes,
ahead.
my number one question concerned vegetable broth. I was told by an Ayurvedic person,
Okay, I remember. Okay.
which vegetables would be the best in cooking like 4 or 5 hours. She said that also would help, not just what you said about juicing, for people who have a hard time digesting raw foods.
Yeah. So the cool thing about vegetable broth is you can put anything in there. You can put your scraps in there as long as you've washed them. So a lot of people like to eat the broccoli stalks, and there's a lot of nutrients in there. And some people, it's just like, no, broccoli is supposed to be flowers. I throw those stalks away. Don't throw them away. Just store them in your fridge until you're ready to make broth. So your broccoli stalks, your what you chop off the two ends of the carrot, all the stuff that you're not going to be using in your regular dishes can go into the vegetable broth. There's really no vegetable that shouldn't be there. There are a few of those cabbage family vegetables, like basic cabbage, that might smell a little funny. They have that odor when you cook them, especially for a long time, but it's not harmful. It's just not, as lovely as when you walk in and smell some things. But I mean, potato peelings, as long as they don't have any eyes in them, which are toxic. You don't want to do that. But basically anything you throw away from the vegetables. And then if you don't have enough, scraps to make your broth and you want to use some actual vegetables, I would just say use some cheap ones, because you're not going to be getting the actual vegetable. You're not going to be getting the fiber. You're not going to be eating it. So things like carrots and sweet potatoes and squash, all that stuff is really good. And then some of those greens that are, really tougher and thicker, like mature kale. Like I usually buy baby kale because I just want to steam it quickly or make a salad. But the mature kale that can just simmer, and all the kale stalks that we throw away when we're going to use the kale for salad or cooking, that can all go into the broth.
Great. So thank you for that question, DA. We've got one more audience question. Cheryl has another question for you, and we have about 2 more minutes, so if we can keep that brief. And go ahead, Cheryl.
Hi, yeah, thank you. I was just wondering if you had any thoughts on sleep. Maybe I missed it, but particularly having practical ways, other than the typical hygiene stuff we all hear about, how to promote better deep sleep in particular.
Ayurveda has a suggestion that would appear to make no sense, but it really does. And that is to, I'm sorry, I'm trying to do 2 things at once. Somebody wanted that link to the Shivananda. Please just write to me, victoria@victoriamoran.com, because I'm not going to be able to put that link in for you while I'm talking to Cheryl. So, what are we talking about, Cheryl?
Sleep.
Okay, so warm sesame oil. Rub it onto your feet when you go to bed. Put some loose socks on, and it shouldn't help. It helps amazingly. And then the other stuff is just your good sense. Get your sunlight in the morning. If you live in, some foggy kind of area where you don't get very much sun, get one of those seasonal active disorder lights and have it on you 15 minutes in the early part of the day. This is going to help your whole melatonin production system, and your sleep is going to be better. You want to sleep in a dark, cool, quiet room. Charge your electronics somewhere else. If you have to wear a sleep mask to get the dark, do that. And finally, the most important thing is to sleep on a schedule. According to Ayurveda, that's going to bed right around 10 or a little bit before, getting up right around 6 or a little before. And for some people, that sounds impossible. But once you get started and once you do it, and it's like, oh, but I don't go to bed that early. What if I can't fall asleep? There are all kinds of wonderful sleep meditations and things that you can find on YouTube. But if you just get into the habit of, you wind down around 9 o'clock, no electronics after 9 o'clock, and you just read and just do your little grooming stuff, turn your lights off at 10 and get up at 6 o'clock, even if you don't feel like it, your entire life will change.
Great. Thank you so much for the presentation and of the answers you provided for the audience. If we could unmute the audience so the audience can show their appreciation.
And through my conference.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No, I'm
So
fine.
much.
Thank you.
Information.
Love you.
Thank you. It's a webinar. I'm listening to it.